that you lost all of your ability to travel, to go out to dinner with friends. John, go to the beach, spend time with people that you love, pet your dog, enjoy a life with children, and in there, bake 2 death sentences. But now you have to wake up in the year 2057. That's 32 years, ladies and gentlemen. This is our client who lived this living hell. Those responsible for this nightmare had the pleasure of freedom. They had the pleasure of not having to explain why an innocent man was in prison for 32 years. And this is John Huffington's life. And thank God he survived. And thank God that he is here to tell his story. And not only tell his story, but write a book about it. And use those dark days that he went through to now instruct us and teach us and educate us. Truly remarkable. John, you have all of our deepest respect. I know how lucky John feels to have survived the ordeal and now be a free man. And so that nightmare started 44 years ago, 32 of them imprisoned. And today is an amazing new chapter in his life as he gets to write that chapter. As we begin this civil journey of justice and accountability. Why? Because there needs to be a reckoning for this man's life being denied and completely derailed. The people and the agents must account for the harms and losses that they caused John. And so we are here today to tell you about the civil lawsuit our law firms have filed to seek justice for John. We will walk you through John's case and the detailed allegations in the complaint. It is an honor for our firm, Romanucci Blandin, along with Hart McLaughlin Eldridge. Both of our national firms are based in Chicago, and we are honored to partner with the Baltimore firm of Saller, Ernstberger, and McElroy. And as Jen said, attorney Hannah Ernstberger is out of town and was not able to be with us today. Now, tragically, you're thinking about this. This is not a one-off case, ladies and gentlemen. This is really a pattern that we have seen in the country now. There are many of these cases, and they're all disturbing, and there should be a national awakening showing of all that thousands of other people around the country have had the same experience as John. Those who have been wrongfully convicted for something that they did not do and losing years of their lives because someone generally lied. I'm from Chicago, so we are painfully familiar with this increase in awareness of wrongful convictions, as we have thousands of years of backlogs of wrongful convictions in our city alone. And I can tell you that most of them are tied to police misconduct. They're tied to prosecutorial misconduct. They are tied to those people and those agencies who manipulate evidence. They lie about evidence. They fabricate evidence. They coerce confessions. Then they don't tell anybody about it. They hide it. It's creating the false narrative for the sake of what? Statistics. As of March 1, 2025, the National Registry of Exonerations added 147 exonerations in 2024. This is about average over the last 10 years, with over 3,600 exonerations in the United States from 1989 through 2024. And according to that National Registry of Exonerations, this state, Maryland, had 3 exonerations last year in 2024. And since 1989, Maryland has had a total of 35 exonerations, which includes John's. But let me put that into greater perspective. Maryland ranked 8th in exonerations, but 18th in population. So other states that ranked higher with more exonerations on a numeric basis were Illinois, California, Texas, Florida, New York. So why is it that Maryland is disproportionate in the number of its exonerations versus its population? So, for the journalists who are here, think about it. Position this as an issue, and let's put a stop to it. What matters today, however, is John and his right to civil justice for all that he lost and all the ways in which he was harmed. His conviction
that John will demonstrate were the result of the wrongful conduct, the unconstitutional conduct of investigators and prosecutors in the murder case involving Diane Becker and Joseph Hudson Jr. in 1981. John has brought suit against several actors in the Harford County area. Those include Harford County Sheriff's Office investigators David Sanneman, William Van Horn, and Wesley Picha. In addition, he has brought suit against the Harford County State's Attorney Joseph Casserly, who held that position as State's Attorney in Harford County for 36 years, and finally an Assistant State's Attorney with that office who tried the 2 trials in 1981 and 1983 against John Huffington, Gerard Coleman. The allegations in the case, in the complaint in particular, are plentiful, and we invite you to read them in detail. In short, they allege 2 forms of misconduct that led to John's conviction, his death sentence in the over 32 years he spent in prison, as well as the subsequent years he spent outside of prison under the threat of a 3rd prosecution. And those 2 forms of misconduct are fabrication of evidence and withholding of evidence that tended to show John's innocence all the way back in the early 1980s. There are many examples set forth in the complaint that John has alleged in support of his wrongful conviction case. We draw 2 to your attention here today. The first is the state's key witness, Dino Canaris, testified that he was present for the murders. Effectively, that he was held hostage by John while John committed the murders. And Mr. Canaris testified and told police that there was blood on John's jacket as a result of these gruesome murders. The state sent that jacket for testing to determine whether or not there was blood. No later than 1991, decades before John would be released from prison, the states received the results of that testing, demonstrating that there was no blood on John Huffington's jacket. The state did not give that evidence to John. He never saw it, while he spent decades with the assistance of the Ropes and Gray law firm fighting to get out of prison. That's the first example. I should note that the prosecutor, Joseph Casserly, told the court that the state had received no such testing regarding a jacket or other items, and so misrepresented, lied to the court about the testing that they had, which tended to prove John's innocence. The second example of misconduct that I will draw your attention to relates to the testimony of an FBI agent, Michael Malone, at John's second trial in 1983. He testified that hairs that were found near the body of Diane Becker microscopically matched the hairs of John Huffington, that they were quote unquote indistinguishable from John's. Extraordinarily powerful evidence on the stand from an FBI agent. Sometime later, the prosecutor, Joseph Casserly, no later than 1999, received a letter from the Department of Justice who had reviewed FBI agent Malone's work in John's case with respect to those hairs. The Department of Justice told Mr. Casserly in a letter that that testimony was false. Again,
it took a lot to get me to become involved in this further litigation. I've been doing this for 44 years, and it's not fun. But there's a lot of reasons to do this, and a big part of that is the obligation I have to my own family, my parents, who aren't here, and my siblings that still are. I'm sorry. And as Tony pointed out when he was talking to, part of what I do, I got really active as an advocate. So this doesn't happen. And I did it for a reason. Like the lane that I worked in when I came home was workforce development. I worked right down the street living classrooms. I was the director of workforce development. And in that role, I oversaw the largest community-based reentry program. So I worked with a lot of men and women that were coming out of incarceration. And not all of them innocent, but just men and women that are coming back to yours and my community that need a chance and need to successfully reintegrate. Through that work, I got connected into the Innocence Network and started attending those conferences. And as Tony said, we go all around the country. Every year they move to a different state for these conferences. And there's always another 150 or so coming home every year. And it takes decades to get these cases straightened out. It takes 2 seconds to put you in, and 30, 40 years to get you out. And to meet these men and these women, I'm not anything special. All of them are the same, cut from the same cloth in a sense. They don't really come with a lot of bitterness. They come with hope, and they're just trying to figure it out. And I think that's the important thing, and give back and make sense of your life, and why you're supposed to be here. So for me, a big part of this is I can't help but acknowledge 32 lost years. But what I refuse is to have 32 wasted years. When I was inside the Maryland prison system, I got involved in self-help program. I became the president of an organization, JC's, that was in there. And that gave me the vehicle, to create programs. 2 of the programs I created while I was incarcerated are in every Maryland prison to this day. The Family Day program, where you actually have an opportunity for a full contact visit with your children. And then there's another program that I didn't create, but I brought from New York called AVP, Alternatives to Violence Program. It was started by the Quakers. It's a conflict mediation type of training program. And it's been expanded to every prison in the state. So again, it's about making your dash count, making sense and giving legacy. So, I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish in there. And when I came into Baltimore with living classrooms, gave me that opportunity to have a little bit of an impact here on the city in some of those neighborhoods. And that's why I do what I do, because otherwise it is wasted years. I have to, my mother said to me at one point, you must be there for a reason to figure it out, like you're supposed to do something. And I listened to that, and I tried, and I still try. And interesting enough, Illinois is actually one of the worst states for wrongful convictions. And their legislature finally got behind that. Instead of spending hundreds of millions of dollars paying these cases out, they said, well, here's $2 or $3 million. And they gave it to the University of Illinois to do what they call wrongful conviction awareness and avoidance class. And they do that with the Illinois Innocence Project. And it's mandatory. And every one of their police academies across the state, I think there's 6 or 7, including the State Police Academy, all their cadets have to attend that class. And I'm part of the original cadre, because they brought in originally 17 honorees from around the state, the country, to participate in these classes and put a face to it and be a part of the class. And it's one of the proudest things I've been able to be, or one of the most private things I've been involved in. It's a little bit ironic to be in a room with 100 police cadets, but they want to hear it. and they kind of look at you like, how did this happen? Well, it happens, and that's the problem. So to make sense out of my life, I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. You know, I can be a voice. I don't necessarily fit the stereotype of what you're going to expect if you hear somebody's on death row and spent 13 years in prison, and that's good too. You know, I can open people's eyes with that. But it comes at a toll too. I don't like this. You know, I don't like coming in these rooms. I don't like coming back into the courtroom and relitigating these things, because the response is going to be just the opposite. You know what I mean? But I'm doing it because, you know, I owe it to my family. I owe it to my family. I owe it to a lot of people. And we got to fix it, you know. And sometimes the only way to fix it is to make the loudest noise and bring the most attention to it. So that's why I'm here today. And I've got a great team behind me. You know, Sean was here representing my original team of Brooks and Gray, who spent 37 years on my case for free. Over 161 attorneys fought so let me stand here. So I would add that too. So thanks for your time.
We'll open it up for questions.
David also spoke first time. Just real quick, there's been awards from the state. Could you talk a little bit about how civil accountability, what that means as far as this case?
Yes, in the civil justice system.
And stand up.
Excuse me. Yeah, in the civil justice system, the only award that you can get is a monetary award at the end of the day. So it's additional money beyond that, which was awarded under the Walter Lomax Act here. However, as a part of that in civil litigation, you are afforded, if you can get past defenses, the opportunity to discover things and the time to discover things that you don't get in a criminal case. We'll be able to question witnesses should they still be living. We'll be able to get documents that perhaps John still hasn't seen. We'll be able to hopefully answer questions that investigators either didn't want to answer, didn't think to answer, or they knew the answer and didn't document it. So there's both the opportunity to recover money and there's the opportunity to investigate this further and continue to prove John's name is innocent.
Can you talk about going after the estates a little bit more in terms of Mr. Casilli and also the other law enforcement officers, especially those two that do not have a representative, and how you're doing that, and what exactly are you hoping to accomplish with that?
Sure. A common part of wrongful conviction litigation is deceased defendants. And the reason is because folks spend a long time in prison before they're able to prove what they need to prove to be released and then obtain what they need to obtain to file a civil lawsuit. So what we've done is reopen the estates of two deceased defendants who had already opened estates and are in the process now of opening estates for the first time for those who never did so on their death. So it's a technical process in the state courts, probate courts.
Hartford County Executive Bob Cassidy, the younger brother of Joseph Cassidy, who is stated as a defendant in this case, looked at his brother as a war hero and also said that the county government doesn't have any role in this case. What's your all's response to that?
In terms of whether his brother was a war hero, it's not an issue in our case. It doesn't have anything to do with his role as a state's attorney in John's prosecution, so we don't have any commentary about that in terms of the lawsuit. In terms of whether the county is liable, that's something that we'll be litigating in court, and it's something that will be briefed and argued zealously.
No comment on whether it was a war hero. It's important to note that Joseph Cassidy was disbarred from the practice of law, and he was disbarred because of what he did in John Huffington's case. You don't get disbarred easily. That's not something that happens easily, certainly not prosecutors. What Joseph Cassidy did in John Huffington's case was unethical, reprehensible, and we want to hold him accountable, even in his passing.
Could you please give us your name?
Brian Eldridge.
Is there I'm curious about the decision to bring this suit now. Is there a statute of limitations that applies, or is this opportunity to sue available at any point?
No, there's a statute of limitations that applies. We're within the statute of limitations. We've been working on this case and investigating it for a long time. We're very careful before we file these cases. We do our due diligence to make sure that we know all the facts. And so that's taken time, and that's been done. Now we're on file and we're ready to go.
And then following up on Barry's question about the deceased defendants, how do you get new evidence, I suppose, when so many of the key people involved are no longer alive?
Well, there's a lot of documents that are alive. There's a long, lengthy record that lives thanks to Lopes and Gray. And there's other people in the case who know facts, who we will be asking questions to, who we will be taking depositions of, and who we think will bring light to this case and to the evidence that was buried and has been destroyed and was never given to John for decades, which caused him to sit in prison for decades because people held on to evidence that was exculpatory, that proved his innocence. They kept that from a person in jail and allowed him to sit in jail for decades, knowing that he was innocent. That's why we're here. And we're going to support that through discovery, through the documents, and through information that people who are still alive and around have. That includes John Huffington.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Okay. Thank you again for your time, for your interest in this very, very important case for John, for his family, for the state, and quite frankly, for the country. Should you have any further questions, you can reach me at press@rvlaw.net. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.